Now, Flutter Entertainment stock down some 20% since mid-February. So what's going on with the world's largest gambling company? Tom Waterhouse joining us from Waterhouse VC. Tom, good to see you again. In fact, that is a big movement, I think, since the last time you were on. What is going on?
Well, look, our focus is on the tech supply, so we don't really focus on the operators as much, but Flutter is the biggest, and they've been a great performing stock for a long period of time, and they've really handled that regulated space really well. But the last month pullback, I think it's a combination of factors. Obviously, the market in general pulled back. Flutter announced there'd been some punter-friendly results in the last quarter, and profit need to be adjusted. Obviously, it's tightening regulatory landscape in regulated markets, advertising restrictions, increasing in tax. So it's always sort of a headwind for those regulated operators. And then also, it's now listed, primary listing is in New York, so it's no longer in that FTSE index. So I think a lot of people of those funds have had to re-index and take it out. So I think they may be a few of the factors, but look, it's very well run. Peter Jackson's a top CEO, and if you want to be invested in that regulated large-scale operator, they're obviously you're paying a premium. They're a high multiple type company. They're always trading at a very high multiple, but they're very well run, and I'm sure they'll bounce back next quarter with some good results.
And you say you are focused on the technology side. What is happening there?
Look, so we the reason why we don't is invest in the gambling operators like a DraftKings or a Tabcorp and so on, is the market can much more easily understand it than a tech supplier. So it's hard to understand if you've got a data supplier or a vision supplier or a mobile app builder. It's hard for an analyst to tell whether that product is going to go into one operator or 30 operators. But an analyst can work out whether, I don't know, Flutter trading at 10 times earnings or 15 times earnings compared to DraftKings, whether that's value. So we focus on that layer that's a little bit harder to understand. And also it's protected in terms of taxation and regulation a lot more, because if you've got a good product, like let's say a data feed, you can be in the US market, Australian market, UK market, Hong Kong. So you're not as exposed to one market and the taxation.
Now, more broadly, I mean, we've spoken about this before, what's going on in the US. Well, there's plenty, it would seem, under the Trump administration, so it's hard to keep up. Nonetheless, with a focus from your point of view on betting and the strict regulation there, state by state, there are some exemptions, of course. What are you seeing there, particularly offshore betting that's larger than the regulated market?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. The US market's it's obviously opened up since 2018, online sports betting. You've got, let's say, 30 states online sports betting allowed. You've got, call it 9 states that have got online gaming. So there's a real product gap. You've got still 20 or so states that don't have online sports betting, and you've got customers, let's say in California, that really want to bet on sports online, but they can't. So they're searching for an avenue, and the offshore illegal bookmakers, that's a right picking ground for them. And then you've got the states that have got online sports betting allowed, but haven't got online gaming. And so that's a right picking for those illegal operators to pick up business. And then in the US, it's a little bit different. The winning bets are taxed in the US compared to in Australia and the UK, winning bets are not taxed. So you don't need to put in, if you win backing knackers in the next, you don't have to put it in a tax form saying you've won X amount betting.
Yep.
In the US, it's different. And they're also, you've got to fill in a form if you win over, call it $600 and 300 times. So if you have a small bet and have a large payout, you've actually got to preemptively fill in a form before you do your tax form. So there's a lot of barriers, obviously very strict KYC requirements. You have to have a different rules in each state. So there's some barriers to entry that we don't have in other markets. And whenever there's barriers to entry or you can't offer the full product suite, then illegal operators can prosper, because they can offer something that the regulated tax-paying operators cannot.
That compliance must be really onerous, though.
Yeah, and I think that's why businesses like Flutter and DraftKings, they have a big advantage from a regulated player, because there is a lot of cost to do business in the US. You've got to pay like a license fee, let's say to go into New York, it's a significant license fee. It might be like $20 million plus, something like that. And then you have to pay 51% gross profits tax. And then you've got to have all of the KYC, the technology, the staff, the data feeds, the licensing agreements with all the bodies. It's a big task, and that's why scale and operational leverage is so important in the regulated market.
Donald Trump is big on loosening regulations. Any sign that, and I know you've sort of said it's really state by state, but anything happening at a federal level that you've heard of?
Look, it's really interesting. It's evolving all the time. And again, we focus on the supply side, so this isn't my core area. But Kalshi, the exchange betting, that's just done an agreement with Robinhood, they've been able to get through the regulation and classify it as a financial type bet when you're betting on certain things, and so it doesn't fall under the sports betting state by state ruling. So that's very interesting. Maybe that forces other states to try and change things, but it's constantly evolving. They went from having approval to betting on the Super Bowl to not having approval to now they're taking bets again on head-to-head matches, and it's classified as a financial wager rather than a sports bet. But I think it's watch this space and constantly evolving, and different products are coming up, and that's what makes it interesting.
And so how are those licensed operators travelling at the moment?
Look, the scale is important. You know, so if you're Flutter and or FanDuel and DraftKings, you're sort of a scale operator in the US, and I think that the market thinks that that's going to be pretty lucrative. You know, so but in an environment that's regulated, there's going to be increasing tax and increasing costs of doing business and compliance. But that's part of being in a regulated market and having a sustainable legal business, where if you have an offshore business that's illegal, you might be able to not have to pay the taxes, but maybe regulation and authorities come down much stricter and able to block your website and block your traffic, and so you don't have a business that can be valued on the same forward multiples as if you have a regulated white market business like a Flutter and so on.